Welcome to the VoiceMe Podcast, information and advice on the world of voiceover presented by voiceme.co.za, the South African search directory for voice artists and related services. I'm Andrew Sutherland, founder of VoiceMe, and in this episode, I'm talking about training as a voiceover artist, rates, quoting, negotiating with clients, mental health, and a whole bunch of stuff with Lutho John. Lutho is a renowned South African entertainer, television presenter, voice artist, and entrepreneur. Known for hosting SABC One shows like Harambe and Spirit Sunday, he has made a significant impact in the entertainment industry. Born in PE and a graduate of Tshwane University of Technology with a BTech degree in musical theatre, Lutho has excelled in live productions, musical theatre, and numerous speaking engagements. As a voice artist, his baritone voice, marked by excellent diction and tone, has been featured in hundreds of documentaries, commercials, and corporate communications. So, Lutho, thanks for joining me today. Can you start by telling us a bit about your journey into voice acting and how it all began for you?
Well, to answer that question, you first have to understand where I come from, right? So I'm originally from Port Elizabeth, and I've been speaking all my life as an orator, right? And also like public speaking. And then that since I was like a kid. So the performance part was always with me. But professionally, it emerged from my theatre career, which is my profession, what I studied. And also my lecturer specifically, David Dennis, at the time said in class that just because I have a good voice, I mustn't be lazy with my speech. And he said I could be a voiceover artist for when acting work is not around. Didn't know what that was, but eventually it would become my path.
I mean, yeah, that's all exciting stuff. But how did that background and musical theatre actually influence your approach to voice artistry and voice acting?
Sure. So basically, voice is such a big part of theatre itself. And also in all the modules and the training and the years, it's one of the consistent ones, apart from acting and also apart from, your other classes. But like voice production is so important because it carries everything through.
Right.
So it was the one area that almost came naturally, but I didn't have the awareness of it. So it emerged from theatre because I did theatre in high school, speech and drama, which is speaking and performance. So I was always speaking, but then with musical theatre specifically, performing on stage, right, with your physicality can be quite large, but it's more contrived. So that's where I could understand and use the same principles that even if I'm doing a move, I still have to have the voice.
Right.
So that's how it moved. Yeah. And then, yeah.
So I hear what you're saying and it's kind of similar, but are there any differences between performing on stage in musical theatre and performing voice? Because they're both quite physical.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're doing like character stuff.
Absolutely.
Or like big energy things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are there any differences or techniques that you use when doing voiceover that are different from like on stage?
Yes, actually, because with stage work, right, you almost have to lift off and leave your body and still you're performing, but you leave your body, you're lighter. With voice, you've got more movement, funny enough, but you're more grounded. You have to be rooted because that's where the gravitas comes from, but also that's where the projection comes from and the nuance is from a rooted place. With theatre, it was different. I suppose it's the colouring in that theatre gave me. It's the tones and the timbres, and also because I could play with the words because you can make it melodic. So I know how to go, like I could be talking like this and then suddenly take it up a little bit, but also bring it back. Theatre was definitely harder, but getting into voice, I had to swap the techniques.
And then when it comes to VO, I mean, you've done tons of different projects, dockies, commercials, the whole range.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite genre that you like to work in?
That's quite an interesting thing because every voice for me is unique. Because every single time I leave my house going to a voiceover, I have to, like, it's almost like the first time. But my favorite, funny enough, is I like doing corporate reads and not specifically corporate narration. But when they have like AVs or where the CEO has to speak or where it's like a corporate video that they're going to show where everyone comes from different parts of the world. I find that that's such a unique thing because it's almost as if I'm speaking on behalf of the leader of the company or the group. So I'm the voice and it's live and it's different people from different sales team. Maybe they want the best. So it brings that human, I suppose that also comes from theatre, right? Where it's like normal audience people. But Yeah, I like that. I recently did one for a pharmaceutical and I milked it because you can have fun with it. Like whether you're doing like you can make it up like a manifesto. And I mean, against a political backdrop, I was playing with that as well. Like going, yeah, we can. So yeah, I like that.
And was that one a live event or did you pre-record that?
Pre-recorded.
Okay.
Pre-recorded.
Right. And then, so say you get booked for one of those.
The live ones.
A live one or a studio one. Is there anything that you do that helps you prepare like on your way?
Yeah.
Like warm-ups or anything like that?
Absolutely. Like I don't think you can just go cold like in a voiceover. I specifically start looking at myself in the mirror because then I'm aware of that it's me and this is how I look because it's not going to be me alone. I have to walk into studio, right? So I bring that consciousness of how my face is looking that day or how I'm feeling. So I start getting in the body of it and then I will start reading out loud or start speaking out loud. Luckily, most of my friends know like what I do, so it's not so weird. And I'll read WhatsApps and messages out loud. And when I get into the Uber, I'll change my tone and I'll start speaking and playing. And he doesn't know that, but I'll start playing with my voice. And then like if I'm seeing someone on my way here, the same thing. But the thing that I do a lot is singing. So I sing, even if it's just a word. Like if I'm running late, time to get ready, let's go. Time to get ready, time to get ready, let's go. Time to get ready, let's go. Time to get ready, let's go. Come on, come on, come on. And then I'm like, Lutho, come. Come. And then I feel it here. And then you feel different parts. Then you know that, okay, why am I feeling so like something's off here? So when you're in the booth, you're already aware.
That's a really cool insight. I mean, and for those of the guys that do sing, even if you don't sing,
yes,
it's fine. No one's going to hear you warm up your singing stuff. I'm not a singer. I definitely don't do that kind of warm up when I'm doing my kind of voice.
Yeah.
I prefer playing my didgeridoo sitting right here in the corner of the booth, which is really great for breathing.
Yes.
It vibrates your lips. It gets your whole mouth and your jaw warm. So if I'm going to do a long voice or any voice, I generally will spend about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just playing didgeridoo, then I'm sorted for like the whole day.
I do the traditional warm-ups if I know that I'm offbeat. Like I'm either feeling slightly off, like I'm tired or I'm sick. Then I'll do the trills and the I believe physical for me is what brings it about.
Right. And then once you're in the booth, what do you do when, let me put you in the situation.
Okay.
You've been given no particular brief on the kind of read that you need. How do you go about creating that persona or that character voice when you get something, if you haven't been briefed on something really
love
specific?
not being briefed because it brings the essence of me. Because sometimes as voiceover artists, when we get briefed, right? For me personally, actually, let me just say that I kind of feel already there's an expectation. You haven't even heard what it is that I'm working with so that you can direct me and get what you want. But now I've become more easier because that I use that as guidance, but I'll still give you mine. It's the script. The script tells you, right? And then they'll tell you, or you ask, is it in-house? Who's the audience? You need to know who's going to be listening. And then I also ask what music is going to be played because the music will drive the energy behind it. It almost feels like that's my audition when I'm doing my first.
So you kind of feel it out naturally based on your interpretation of the script as it comes to you. So, and I think that's a really important thing to think about as well. It's like script interpretation is probably about 75% of the job.
Yeah.
If you know what you're saying, who it's for, and you can read the intention of the script that the client has written for you, it already informs kind of where, in a kind of macro grouping, where you're going to place your voice for this character or this read. So that's really important. Like script interpretation, I think, is probably one of the most important skills. It is one. To learn.
I mean, I can't stress that enough because the performance is expected. Like you have to be able to perform and read and deliver. But the interpretation of the script, like because there's nuances. Forget the punctuation, but the thought behind this copy. Right? Even before the character that you're reading for, the tone, you have to understand the words behind it because it gives you an interpretation that you're able to read. And if that's not what they want, you're still able to take the direction because you understand where the script is coming from.
Yeah, it's nice to have a starting point. So if you do get a client like that where they're not really sure what they're after, or they might have an idea in their mind, but they can't really envision it out loud. You know, give them something that you interpreted, and then they're like, okay, cool, that's what we're working with, that's where we're sitting.
Yeah.
That's like 9 out of 10 of where we're looking for. Let's get it to a 10 out of 10. What's going to get it to that 10 out of 10?
Yeah.
This. Okay, cool. You take that direction, you implement that into your
Absolutely.
read. And that's really all that taking direction is. It's basically taking the words that the client has written and the direction that they're giving, and then implementing that into your read and being able to implement that. So is there anyone that you've worked with, director or a coach, that's given you information on how to do that? Because a lot of guys that contact me for info is like, okay, cool, I know how to read, I can read clearly, but how do I actually change that part of my voice? How do I actually take that direction and make it different enough that it's not just more of the same?
I know Louise St. Clair is quite good with that. She's quite good with that because it's a performance thing. Because as an actor, you're able to slip into a different character, right? Or for instance, whether it's a Shakespeare piece and then you'll read it and you'll bring it down, right? Like in rehearsals as you're reading like together, but then you'll move to a different space. Then it has to become bigger, and then now you have to project to the end. So you shift through those. I always say words are around us all the time. I am able to, on a billboard, and I'll show, let's say, certain friends, like if I'm driving with them and they want to do voice, we'll be driving through a billboard and I give them a performance. You'll be behind a truck. In my mind, I'll give a performance. Even YouTube videos, and sometimes it's silent, or you hear someone else's. So you have to play. That's a keyword, play. You can't lock in because every script is different. It may be similar reads or similar categories for the sake of the broadcaster or the read. And then you're always ready, even for things that you don't think you'll ever do. Like, how's the brew? Like, how's the house? I'm not that sort of a guy, right? But recently I've been doing like a lot of those kind of reads. And it's so awkward, but it's so much fun now. I'm like, oh, okay.
So I find when I'm trying to upskill a kind of vocal style or a kind of character in my mind, that I give that accent or that personality a kind of a name.
Yeah.
And I've kind of got a Rolodex of names and characters that I can draw on, that I've practiced.
Yes.
And so when a client comes to me and says, okay, well, we want to do this read in a Scottish accent.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, cool. Well, in that case, you don't want Andrew, you want Angus.
Yes.
And then I drop into my Scottish accent, and this is Angus speaking now. It's not Andrew.
Yes.
It's a different character, a different personalization, a different way of speaking. And I can draw on that, on those little characters that I've built up in my mind's Rolodex.
Yes.
And adjust as needed. And I find that's a cool technique for me anyway. So I'm not ever kind of blindsided when I go into a recording session. They say, okay, this is the character, or this is the kind of read we want. I'm like, cool, well, that sounds like an Angus read, or that sounds like an Aiden read, or whatever. Or like I've got like 100 names of characters in my head.
Yes.
And I can draw on those guys and almost embody a different person so I can sound different. And that's an easy way of doing it, but it does take practice. You need to take tons of scripts at home and read the same script in, like, especially with accents.
Yeah.
Read it in that accent. Go to a vocal coach like Louise, who can help you with accent and diction and cadences and nuances of those accents, and then kind of almost like save that into a voice folder in your brain that says, cool, that's what they want. I can draw on that.
I used to have a voice folder. You're right. Yeah. Of ads. So I found that by looking at foreign ads, right, I would do what you're doing. And then also with that, it's like also how you place. So for instance, if I'm doing a different character, maybe I will sit in one part of my body, like in the hip, or I will crunch up and it'll automatically bring a different read. So I change my body to get to that sort of character. If I'm trying to reach up, or I'm very nervous because like now it's gonna, and then it tenses, it moves different parts. But I do find that watching visual, you're able to pick up because you can paint it, like you're saying, with characters.
Yeah, that physicality really informs your voice.
Yeah.
So, if you need to be nervous, like physically act out that you're nervous.
Yes.
And that's where acting training comes into voice, because someone who hasn't done musical theatre or hasn't done any drama or acting is going to struggle to physically perform like that.
Absolutely.
Versus someone who has done that kind of training. And that's why I always go on and on about new voice actors doing acting classes, because it really helps build your confidence in your voice, but also that physicality makes such a difference when you are actually in booth and doing that kind of read.
Yeah, and you're also able to understand direction, versus if you are able to have the understanding of what it means to switch characters, even if you don't get it right, you are able to move the performance at the session that's happening. You're giving them something else, and then maybe they will like something else. But you must have the language and the understanding. I mean, the simplest one I could say is the magic what if. What if I was a pastor and now I have to, on a Sunday, I'm like, oh, nyafika manje, and I'm here now. It's the simplest one. It's a Stanislavski method. Where what if I was that person? So you think of that, or who do I know that's sort of like that? And sorry for just going off beat. If you listen to the client, more often than not, what they're saying, you can hear it. And they're also trying to. So you don't listen to someone net give a read. You try and understand them. It's almost like a relationship where it's like, okay, let me pull back. What is she like? What's she saying? Kind of vibe.
Okay, cool. We've talked a lot about performance and training and stuff, but I want to move on to some other things. I mentioned at the beginning in my intro that we're going to be chatting about the dreaded rates question.
Sure.
So, it can be tricky for a lot of voice artists. How do you determine your rates, or what factors do you consider when a client comes to you with a project and says, what you're going to charge me?
Come on. Yeah. First and foremost, I'm very well aware of my worth, right? Just on the basis that not only did I study musical theater, but I also performed like immediately after school. So this is what I've always done. So I was able to gauge already how much I was getting. Then the fees changed because there'd be different reads, but I still knew relatively what was happening. And then certain clients will come along and there'll be certain things that they bring to the table. And obviously you are open to those opportunities. I always ask them to go first. All right. And then if it's a low ball, I don't even bother.
Just apologize. Sorry, I can't, move on.
I move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the same thing with online, right? Because sometimes you'll get DMs and information with the amount. And I feel like that's just too watery. Sometimes if you stop and you're like, something here, you must see the script.
Yeah. I always say to you guys, and I've got an article and a blog post on the VoiceMe site as well, of 7 questions that you need to ask in order to get an accurate quote.
Yes.
You need to know what category it's from, how many scripts, how long are they, how long is it being used for, what's your budget.
Absolutely.
Always ask them for their budget, because if they've got a fixed budget in mind, then you can start a negotiation process from there. But if they don't have a budget, then you're like, cool, well, I'll quote my rate.
Yeah.
And then you need to know if there's a deadline and if they need to book a studio for you, or if you need to record from home.
And how many takes would they want?
And also, especially with some of the international clients, quite often they'll ask and they'll brief you in this way. They'll say your quote needs to include a certain number of revision sessions.
Yes.
And they'll specify that and then include that in your quote when you do it, because they've asked for that. Don't just say, okay, it's going to be this much extra.
Yes.
Include that in your original quote. That's what they've asked for. What I usually say in that case when I'm asked about that, here's my quote. This includes all the voice usage, whatever, plus these 2 revision sessions that you've asked for.
Yeah.
But if we use more than those 2, then note that it's going to be extra on top. And that's just part of negotiating. So is there anything that you do when negotiating rates with clients other than those 7?
Yeah, other than those, and do you know why those are so good? Because they're almost like the through line. Because if you go on the VoiceMe, or even just for different categories in reads that you do, when you know the categories and the different reads and where it's going from, that's almost like that needs to be your arsenal, because sometimes and it's not about going over extra like 2 words or whatever. Not, it can be a completely different thing, and they're not aware of that. Like especially with in-house versus a public audience versus like a training. So there's certain nuances that you have to know. Also, I don't just take what they bring. I ask questions. I'm like, because you ask me like last minute, I always try and get the best deal as a voiceover artist. I don't come there and then I make sure I deliver. Also, you must go into, especially international sessions, with the awareness of what is it that you want as well. And you must be sure to deliver.
I think a lot of people, and I say this in another podcast episode as well, a lot of people feel that all the power lies with the client and what they say goes. And it's really not the case.
Sure.
It's much more equal than
Good one, Andrew. Good point.
Like if you go to a McDonald's and you go to them, cool, I want to buy your Big Mac burger meal. You're not going to negotiate price with them. That's the supplier. That's the voice artist
Absolutely.
in the situation.
Yeah.
You, as the person buying it, is not going to go negotiate that price. The price is set. There it is on the system. You won't even think twice about trying to bargain for a better price
That is so
on a
true.
Big Mac.
Yes.
And I don't know why, and it's a common thing within the voice acting community,
Yeah.
is that people think that they have to negotiate and go through this process. But really, if you've got a rate that you're willing to work with and that's your rate,
Yeah.
you can 100% stick to it. And if a client comes to you and says, okay, well, I've got X and your rate is Y, try meet them, meet their expectations. But if it's way off, sometimes there's just nothing
it's
you
just
can
like,
do.
thank you.
And I always say that sometimes if a rate is really, really low, it's almost better to do it for free than to do it for cheap.
Yeah.
Because if I do it for free, then I'm doing them a favor. I'm saying what you're offering for me is actually not worth it for me.
Absolutely.
But
On
tell
a
you
value
what,
sense.
let me give you this free one on the understanding that when you book me again, and you will book me again because I know I'm going to do a great job, you know my rates, you know my full fee, this is what you're going to get, and you're going to pay me my full fee. And it doesn't always work out, but I'd far rather for myself say, cool, I did this one as a free job in order to try land that client, rather than I settled for that cheap rate that they offered.
I get you.
It wasn't worth it.
Yeah. And then they'll end up going with that. So you really, as a voice, you are the one steering this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It does come down to you at the end of the day. I want to move on from rates, unless you've got any questions for me about rates.
So in terms of your rates, are you
My personal rates?
Yeah. Do you encounter any problems from people trying to match you up with, let's say, they'll say, yeah, but I got this from so-and-so, or...
Well,
like, yeah.
No. I mean, I haven't come across that situation. That I'm hoping is because more and more voice artists are sticking to the SA rates guidelines, or at least aligning their own rate cards with those guidelines. So we're all more or less in the same zone, and I'm hoping that's the case. But no, I've never had someone come to me and said, well, so-and-so charged me this, but you charging me that.
Yeah.
Can you match it? I've never had that situation. But that's the advantage of being in a free market, in what we call a non-union market.
Yeah.
Because you can charge whatever you like. And even agents can charge whatever they like. Yes, we have the SA rates guidelines to pull from, and that's what we try to do, because those are set for fair market rates. Those rates have been determined to be those fair rates that for the kind of work that we do. So if you are aligning your voice rate card, if you've got a personal one like myself, to those rates, you're not going to have problems like that. And the clients that, if they did come with that kind of query saying, well, so-and-so charged me this, I'm like, cool, well, book that person then if you feel that that's what you need.
Do you think the general rates are fair?
Yes. I think our rate card is pretty good.
Pretty decent.
I've done a lot of research into rates and and why they are the way they are and where it's set, and also from around the world why the rates are set there. Like in the US, the non-union rate card is, the guidelines are from the GVAA, the Global Voice Acting Association, and those guys put a ton of research into kind of finding those fair market rates. So quite often I'll find myself looking at our rate card and comparing it to theirs and seeing where those differences are, and bearing in mind that the market size and the exposure of your voice in the US is massive compared to South Africa. Yeah. In the US, there's a population of nearly 400 million people. Here we've got about 65 million people. It's not really comparable. And it's not like, oh, just divide by 4 and then you get it.
It doesn't work like that,
It's not quite the same. So the rate cards around the world work quite differently from each other. But to answer your question, our rate card, if you are using it for the South African market, I'd say that's a pretty fair...
It's decent.
It's pretty up there with good, fair market rates.
Yeah.
There's a couple of sections where it might be a little bit off. Like in the audiobooks rates on our SA guidelines, the way it's structured anyway is much, much higher than what the global norms are. But even on the rate guides, it says, please contact us for a custom quote in that section. So like, it's not a stock standard set in stone rate card that you must stick to this. Obviously, there's room for negotiation. That's what a free market is. You can always
and
negotiate.
What your agent is doing, or yourself.
But I would still say never work for less than what you feel you're worth. Aim for higher.
Always.
You can only come down from there. But if you aim high and the client is like, cool, we're good with that.
Yes.
Great, you score a bit of extra.
Yeah.
Speaking on that, like, how do you feel in the years that you've been doing this? How do you feel it's changed since you started and where it is now in 2024?
I definitely feel like it's become more alive, right? In the sense that the key players back then were seasoned for sure and professional, but it was almost there was no life. There was no sense of opportunity, of sense of movement, of sense of new things. I find that the voiceover industry currently is almost rising up with the international. It's on the same playing field in terms of our equipment, in terms of our delivery, in terms of just the workflow of it. I think, though, that the shift is coming, but it's not going to come as soon in South Africa. But there is a shift coming.
In what way?
The artists are going to be the ones steering the voiceover industry. There's going to be less other key players involved, where you as the artist are going to be the person trading. There's not going to be a middleman.
You're going to be the one in control. I would agree with you. I've definitely seen that over the 20 years that I've been in this industry. Like, way back, it was almost the only way to get voiceover work 20, 30 years ago was to have an agent and sign them, because clients literally didn't know how to contact a voice artist except through agents that would represent them.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and with the rise of online casting over the last kind of 15 years or so, and that started all in the States, the idea that clients could work directly with artists and cut out that middleman or the agent, and that's not to say that agents don't have a place. They definitely do. I'm all for agents. But there is definitely a trend from the client side that they would rather work directly with an artist and negotiate with an artist than have to go and jump through 2-3 other people to get that conversation going.
Yeah.
And I think also in South Africa, we haven't been in the voice side of things, a very audition-based industry before. And in the States, it's been almost exclusively audition-based for decades. And the idea that for every job, you need to read a bit of that script and send it in, and the client will choose you based on that read of their script, that's almost foreign to us because that's not the norm here.
Yeah.
Whereas in the States, I tell that to people and my colleagues and voice actors in the States, they're like, you get jobs just off your demos? Like only without auditioning? And they're blown away. It's just mind-boggling to them. They're like, how does that even work?
So true.
So I think there is going to be a trend in South Africa where we catch up to that way of doing things.
Catch up is the keyword,
because it does make it much easier for the clients to get a better idea of what you're going to be bringing to their project, that specific project. Whereas a generic demo is great, and if you've got great demos, even better. And yes, you might get jobs from that. But say, for example, recently I did a job for a client where they wanted it to be very kind of sportsy and upbeat, but with a movie trailer vibe. And I was like, I don't have a demo like that.
Yeah.
So what I did is I actually had ChatGPT write me a short 30-second script, and I just recorded that script in the style that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Added some music and sound effects and sent that off to them as my audition or my demo, even though I hadn't received a script from them on their own thing yet.
Okay.
And that's how I got that job, is because it was custom done for them. And I think it makes a big difference to them, like hearing something in context for them to make that hiring decision. I find that kind of idea of auditioning or sending something custom to a client more often is definitely going to become more common.
A similar situation in the past where something like that. I was in studio for another client. The engineer's like, can you just read something? The only thing I had was like captions on my phone, but then I was able to play around and then just imagine, and I played with it. And it goes back to you knowing how to play with words, because sometimes you're just given something or you're not given anything and you have to come up with something on the spot. But I also find that with that, it goes back to that whole thing of the business side. You are the business. So we are definitely moved towards that sort of part. I think even if the agent role matures or changes in a different way, there's going to be a difference between how you and your agent operate. You can see just the South African arts as a whole specifically, and how I mean, the regulations and, as you're saying, the online, how everything is moved online and how these young kids are just like on it. It's definitely going to be shifting towards that. You need to have your things in order.
Speaking about trends and things, obviously AI has been a big thing for the last few years.
Yeah.
Have you had anything AI related impact your voice career?
So firstly, I did my own AI vibe, one of those free ones online, because I'm a voiceover artist, so I needed to know, right? A couple of weeks ago, I had a voiceover and the clients were using an AI voice as the guide. Not only was the guide an AI voice, but it was an American guy. And luckily the engineer and also the clients, the South Africans, said, but this is completely different. AI is here to stay. I think with the voiceovers, and with the AI and the voiceover artists are going to merge, because the AI is going to come up with something that we would not think of, but able to emulate. The AI is not going to be able to emulate quite the nuances of the artist. I definitely foresee the technology and the human merging together, right? It's almost like, as much as I thought, sure, okay, cool, I'll still be able to work, you still have to keep on trend and still be aware. I mean, there's a big hullabaloo, like there's going to be no work for voiceover artists, and especially in the States, that's definitely not the case.
It's definitely a big discussion over there. But I don't think any trained professional voice artists are going to be losing work or very much work with AI.
Yeah.
I think the people that are going to be losing out are the new guys that aren't trained, that are trying to make it in the industry without actually doing the proper coaching and actually getting their performance better. Because at the end of the day, if an AI can read a script for a client that's good enough, you need to be much better than that AI for them to say, cool, well, we're going to give you more money to use a human.
Yeah.
And if you aren't trained as a voice artist, you're not going to be better than some of these AIs that are out there.
So true.
So why should the client hire you when an AI can do it better for free or for even cheap?
Yeah.
So I think
that's quicker and just like
quicker.
everything.
Yeah. So I think that's where the AI voice thing is going to go. It's going to take out like all the people that decided they want to be voice artists in COVID and like the whole industry was flooded with thousands and thousands. All those guys that decided they wanted to do that and didn't put in the training, all of those guys are going to get taken out by AI.
Absolutely.
And all the guys that did the training and have been working on their craft and practicing, those are the guys that are going to be totally fired.
And I'm so sorry to say this, but I can't help myself. It's so true what you're saying, because a lot of actors, right? And there are actors and voiceover artists who balance the two quite well. But the ones who came knocking during COVID, not only are they no longer doing voiceovers, but they're back in the pool in the sense that they're not even doing their acting things. So it's not a one and done Somanet kind of vibe. It's a continuous training. And even like with the AI, you need to know what's up. You need to practice to hear where are you, because you need to be able to position yourself in a way that you just don't go down.
Most definitely, yeah. The AI in tech is definitely something to just keep an eye on. You're also an entrepreneur. You do other stuff other than voice. So you talked about balancing earlier. How do you balance your VO work with running your other business?
I don't. Like, I'm always catching up. And I don't even have children and I'm not married. But I'm always catching up with my personal stuff. So script writing and projects. I'm in that shift right now where I'm not giving more focus, holding a firmer grip. So as I speak to you, I've just come from a meeting with someone, like a young girl, who is going to be helping me more virtually. For instance, yesterday I was just so exhausted, but I still had to do the project planning and I still had to plan my own personal photo shoot and this and that. It never ends. So I'm brilliant with lists, right? I think you have to find certain systems. Pen and paper works best for me, and then you have a backup digitally that is always there. So you need to say what works for you, but you also need to have other things, whether it's paying you the same or less, but within the industry, like play around and see what other skill set can you grow. I really think it just broadens you. It's one thing to be an actor and a voiceover artist. I mean, there's writers, there's like everyone's got something else, and that informs your voiceover work because, you know what I mean? Because you've got almost like a different eye, a different conversation, and I tell you, voiceovers are everywhere. That's why I think for me, when it comes to placing myself out there, it's really word of mouth. It's one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because it informs.
This industry thrives on relationships and
Absolutely.
referrals. If you're not building those relationships, you're going to become sucked down very quickly and you're going to not get much work. You need to be actively finding and creating those relationships with clients, other voices, whatever it is. You need to be actively doing that, or you're going to be dead in the water.
And spotting the gap. Like, say to people, like, whether you're a bri or anything, and you're like, well, I'm a voiceover artist. Oh, yeah. And then they're like, wow, you've got to bring that, because it's in every... And I can't stress this enough. Like, I've seen also on your blog, voiceovers, and especially the industry and the growth right now, literally it's everywhere. So you also need to think of yourself in a way that goes, my voice right now, how am I going to be able to shift into the next phase or whatever it is? It's always dynamic. It's always moving. Even to the point that sometimes when you're in studio and then there's an artist in the booth, when they get in direction, take that as your direction as well. Listen, don't be closed off. And then otherwise you're just going to be like a singular...
Be present and aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and we've spoken about this privately outside of the podcast, but mental health and general physical health.
Okay.
Given the demands of this profession and whatever, do you have any advice? Because I know you're a big fan of being like
present
and all that. Is there any advice you can give to guys out there about how to keep that mental resilience and that confidence while in a profession that is quite often full of rejection, to be honest?
Also, full of not negativity, but minuses. It's almost a minus. It's like depletes versus assets. I always say, before you even leave the house, you've got to be aware of your own story. Like, what's your story? Not who are you, because that's loaded. What's my story? My story is, for me, I'm a black Xhosa guy from the Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth. I came to Pretoria, studied musical theatre, been doing theatre, television, this and that, and now I'm doing. So I know my story and how it weaves through the world that I live in. When you've got that awareness, you're able to not take things to heart so much, and you're also able to adapt, because there are certain people that just fight it so hard, and you can see that it's actually hurting them.
I think a key thing to think of is that in general in voiceover, there is going to be a lot of rejections. There's going to be a lot of no's. If you're the kind of person that in general takes things very personally and takes those no's and rejections to heart and like lets it eat away at you, you're going to struggle in voiceover, because 80% of the time, maybe higher, you're not going to get the gig.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you need to be able to say, cool, well, I tried my best on that audition, or I did my best on my demos. I didn't get the gig. Move on. And it's not, and I'm not saying that lightly, like, okay, move on from that.
Moving on.
It's just like, take that rejection or whatever as a learning experience. It's like, cool, well, I wasn't quite right for that particular job. That's fine. I'll do better next time. And then go and practice more, go train more, go coach more. You know, don't linger on that and let it eat you away, because
it's not hating
it's
people.
Not sustainable. Because when that one does come through that you do get, it feels so much better. But dealing with that rejection and those no's is actually really important. And you know, feel free to take rest days. Like, you don't have, like, these days it's almost expected that you kind of on all the time.
Moment to breather.
But really take time for yourself and reset after a bad rejection or whatever it may be, and do something that you love, a hobby outside of voiceover, because...
Or responsibilities, not even hobbies. Like, you've got other... So I think that's such a key point, what you're saying. I think a lot of people come, especially when they it's not a sense of desperation, but it's almost as like you're not present in your being. Because I find that even if a session goes long and you leave there feeling you left your house. So when you leave your house, you know that, okay, I'm coming to studio. You're seeing other artists. You're having a chat there with the engineer. You're meeting new clients, old clients. So it's more about cultivating the space of voiceovers, because one day it's a rejection, one day you're late, one day they said, oh, sorry, we're moving somewhere. So that's the constant. So what your thing is, I'm here, I'm part of this world. Okay, what's happening today? Well, you didn't want me? Okay, cool.
You should be having fun in whatever you may be doing in that moment.
Yeah.
It's been so cool having you here today.
I love it! What?
So,
Yeah.
if any of the listeners want to get hold of Lutho,
Please.
let
hit
us know your socials,
Yes.
or your mail, whatever you got. How do people get hold of you if they need to?
Okay, cool. So, my details will be up on my Instagram. It's Lutho John. Same thing on Instagram page. Definitely
Cool.
there.
Awesome.
Or through you, because
Or through me.
Yes, you.
And that's all for this week's episode. A big thank you, Lutho, for joining us and sharing your incredible insights and experience in the VO industry. If you need help with rates or quoting for a job, book a free consultation with me using the link bigmouthstudios.co.za/bookings. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and my support team at support@voiceme.co.za. Leave a comment here or give me a call on 0861 VoiceMe. That's 0861 864 2363 if you're in South Africa. And to sign up for a VoiceMe profile, register from the homepage at voiceme.co.za. Like, follow, and engage with VoiceMe and each other on @VoiceMeSA on all social networks. If you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, turn on automatic downloads, or click the bell icon to get notified so you don't miss our next one. I'm Andrew Sutherland, and that's it from me here at VoiceMe for this week. Cheers for now.